Welcome back, everybody, to Missed Apex Formula E podcast. We are all charged up and ready to go. We are back. It has been a long time since we have been sat here all together. It was, season break, summer break? I don't quite know what we're calling it in Formula E, but it has been a good 4 months, I think, since we have sat down and chit-chatted. And joining us today, we have, of course, partner in crime, the other Chris Stevens. How are we doing today, Chris?
Macy. Yeah, grand. It's been a while since I've done one of these shows. It feels very odd to be back in our Formula E shed, but I'm very much looking forward to a whole raft of changes for this Formula E season.
Whole raft of changes, but one thing that has not changed is our impeccable ability to dress really, really fly. We have our matching wrong but first hoodies on, which you can acquire for yourself still, I believe. So if you want those, I'm sure Spanners will link them down below, because who wouldn't want to look cool like we do? They're actually very cozy, and I definitely haven't stained them multiple times, and Tide pens definitely have not come to my rescue on multiple occasions. So we're off to a great start. And joining us, of course, we have Spanners. How you doing, Spanners?
Your intros are very different to mine. Never change. So you guys have not been doing Formula E podcasts. I've been sat here over the break and been doing pretend practice Formula E podcasts. So yeah, I'm sharp. I'm ready to go. Last season, I was really excited to see this production get up and running and really get into the swing of Formula E. Great interviews from Chris Stevens with drivers. I think the race coverage was, fantastic. Made new friends in the form of Nicole. We had old friends like Brad coming on as a driver expert. And this year, I want to be included. So basically, I got FOMO from last season, and I want to play Formula E podcast too.
Spanners wants to be involved. Spanners does not want to leave a single podcast unturned where he could be the favorite one. That's actually secretly the motivation.
No, it's not true. You won't find me on the MotoGP podcast. Those guys can stick to themselves. However, the MotoGP podcast is beating us, because I'll be Team Formula E, on downloads, which is, we've got to get those numbers up. We've got to bump those numbers up. So tell your friends, Missed Apex Formula E.
Absolutely. All of our friends, which we definitely all have, because we definitely don't just spend all of our times at racetracks and in front of microphones.
Yeah, I mean, all my friends are you guys, so...
I'm an old man. I have teenage. I'm not in the making friends part of my life. Leave me alone.
To be fair, though, and this is a big thing, you're only really friends if you have friendship bracelets or matching tattoos. So Spanners is in, but Chris, you still don't have a friendship bracelet or a matching tattoo.
Well, whose fault's that?
I don't know. You tell me. You have the ability to make bracelets too.
We do have matching jumpers on, though, so I feel like this is good enough. No, okay, never mind.
No. Anyway, into the new season of Formula E. We are jumping straight in with hopefully some preseason testing in a couple of days, because unfortunately Valencia, the area where preseason testing is potentially not going to occur, there has been massive flooding, humanitarian crisis sort of level stuff where we can't really get to the track. The entire city is kind of shut down. So lots of thoughts with that community as they're trying to rally and figure out what's going on in their areas. But also it just does put Formula E in a bit of a tight spot, because there is a chance that logistically it just might not be possible. The track does seem to be okay, but the roads going in are not.
Yeah, obviously the infrastructure has a part to play in that as well. Formula One had the same thing with Imola, and I think this is a completely different scale. You've got streets literally littered with cars that have been flooded and then deposited like silt at one end of a certain road and stuff like that. So obviously in those situations, you want to make sure that the area is back up and running on its feet. But I think we move forward with the assumption that it can happen.
Well, I certainly hope so. If it does, or if we have to find an alternative venue and date, regardless of where Formula E testing is going to take place, we've already got a little bit of pre-season drama in the form of Nissan and Jaguar breaching the cost cap. And part of their punishment is missing a session of pre-season testing.
No.
Yeah.
That's significant.
on
Can't they
top
just
of a
find
fine.
a tax rebate and just say that made it okay?
The catering budget at Nissan and Jaguar were off the charts.
Every time we have to talk about cost caps, it always makes my head hurt a little bit because in theory, we know how budgeting works.
Yeah.
But then whenever you're dealing with a team that's that big and has that many numbers that they're dealing with, it always just makes my head spin a little bit.
You and me both, Macy.
Do we think that with missing some preseason testing because of the Evo evolution, that's the other big thing.
Mm.
We're jumping into a new car. This is sort of the year, especially where you don't want to be losing out on preseason testing because they've also changed the tires a little bit as well. So
100%.
it is a big heavy hitter. And I don't think they have new drivers though. Those two
They
teams
do.
have the same lineup, don't they?
Nissan has got an old new driver in the form of
Okay.
Norman Nato because he's moved back across from Andretti back to Nissan. I'm sure we'll get onto this when we talk about the driver changes in detail, but yes, absolutely. This is not the year to be doing it because it's an entirely new powertrain that all the teams are bringing in, or all the manufacturers are bringing in anyway, because we're at the new powertrain cycle every 2 years. So with the Evo, we've got the new powertrains in. We've got new Hankook tires that are supposedly, 10 to 15%, or 10% or so more grip than the previous one, which was a big complaint about the sort of first generation Formula E Hankook tire, because we should have been going several seconds a lap quicker than we ended up going with the performance increase of between Gen 2 and Gen 3, which ended up not happening because of the Hankooks. And so, yeah, this really is not the year to be missing out on the power of just like one test session. I remember a few years ago at Techeetah, they back in the Gen 2 days, and they did a mid-season test in Marrakesh after the first couple of races. And Techeetah turned their season around just with one test day in Marrakesh, where suddenly they found something and they were absolutely on top of the car for the rest of the season.
And just for added context, all of our preseason testing, those sessions are 3-4 hours apiece.
3 hours each, I think.
Yeah. So it's not insignificant when you think that a race itself is only about 45 minutes.
Exactly.
And yes, some of that time is dedicated to tweaking with the car and changing some things up, but that's still about the time that you would take to do multiple race weekends when you consider that qualifying itself is also, only about an hour in total, maybe.
So I suppose we're going to be talking about the new car, and since you started on the tires, is it necessarily a good thing to have grippier tires? Because you, for example, in Formula One, you could make all the tires last the race distance if you wanted to. You could have tires that lasted all race. There's deliberately some tire wear and variance in tires to create a tire delta. So really, in a single tire sport like this, your selection of tires is for the good of the whole season, for the series. So are we making tires so that drivers will be happier? Every single driver gets in the car and goes, oh, there's a bit more front end grip on that. I can take the corners a bit faster, but so can everybody else. I think one of the things that makes Formula E look like a challenge, even around a tight Grand Prix circuit such as the London E-Prix, is that they're really struggling to find the grip. And there's you can have a big skill difference between the drivers, and that's the difference between getting a run and an overtake done. The danger is, if you put these on slicks and put them around the London E-Prix circuit, it's Monaco, and no one's overtaking anyone.
So there will still be a lack of grip because we're still running on a very heavily grued road-esque tire. It's not a racing tire in a traditional sense at all. So there will still be that familiar floating and wrestling with the car. But the push for grippier tires, I think it's more of an image issue, because one of the biggest problems with Formula E is people think that they're slow. But the thing is now, in terms of straight line performance, these are on the same pace as Formula One cars now. They just don't have anywhere near as much aero or mechanical grip as anything close to other single-seater series around the world, because it's not supposed to. It's not really the point
that claim,
of the series.
That claim, that's quite a big claim, that they're as fast as Formula One cars.
Well, it's the fastest accelerating single-seater in the world now.
Yeah, but how? So maybe 0 to 60.
0 to 60 in 1.82 seconds, as Macy has very kindly noted down here. But in top-end speed, you're looking at about like 180, 200. And that, not that you'll ever see them do that, because the circuits are never big enough for them to do that, but also just in terms of this improving of performance, because we're starting to see a sort of general, very slow transition towards more permanent facilities. That is also part of the problem as well.
It's really just going to be a very fun year. I got to talk to some of the drivers actually when we were in Portland about Gen 3 Evo and more specifically switching over to the all-wheel drive. And there was this great mix of them being very excited for it, but also very skeptical. But the one thing I remember was asking Maximilian Günther about the tires and just like progress in general. And he had gotten to test them at that point, an initial one.
Ah,
And he just had this like smile that came on his face of, oh, this is gonna be good.
everyone
And I kind
else
of wish that I
waiting.
had a camera on at that point because it was just like, you know, the little Grinch smile that appears when he gets a wonderful, awful idea. It was kind of reminiscent of that.
So Max Gunther is solely on Formula E and has been for a few years now, whereas his teammate Jean-Eric Verne hops in between the Formula E and the World Endurance Championship, i.e., what some people might call a proper racing car, with actual grip and downforce and speed. And I imagine the two feel incredibly different. And I wonder, like Max's viewpoint there is much narrower than, say, like Jev's or Sebastian Buemi's or Stoffel Van Dorn, anybody else who goes and does another program.
Very good point. But we did briefly mention in that the all-wheel drive, which is probably the thing that people are going to notice the most about this season because it's going to be something very tangible. They're going to talk about it probably excessively on the broadcasts because that's what you do when something's new. Engages the front powertrain, can be used during qualifying duels only, race starts, and attack mode. So looking at something very interesting to give a bit more power, a bit more control during those times, and just an added element of strategy as well.
I'm excited about this, and I have lots of things to say. So Chris should go first.
Okay, so this it's a big song and dance about it, and I think people are going to end up disappointed when they hear it's not constantly engaged, the front axle, the front powertrain. It's a very, very small window where they actually get to utilize it. So it's going to help with performance for sure, because the activation of the front powertrain is part of the reason why this is now the fastest accelerating single seater in the world. But also the improvements in traction as well. What you'll need to have is a very adaptable driver who can go from being in a rear-wheel drive car to a four-wheel drive car like that, because it will be like that. It will be, you'll be mid-race, you'll do your attack mode, and then suddenly you've got a completely different car underneath you.
I think it might affect how they set things up, but I think they're going to be fine with that switch. And you are making the fact that they're not always on four-wheel drive a bad thing. I think it's going to work. And I don't know whether they're doing this because they go, oh, well, let's just try it out in a limited way. Formula E is such a good series for going, let's just try stuff. So maybe they're doing it in this limited way, and then it's easy to walk it back. So if this doesn't work, if cars are going into the wall, if it doesn't improve racing or it's bad, they can always just go, do you know what? Just turn off the drive to the front wheels, and they could just operate as rear wheel cars. So they could be doing it like that. But in this interim, where it's only happening in attack mode, it now creates a substantial delta. If every car had it, who cares? Again, it's like our slicks. You're just making the cars faster. That doesn't solve the efficiency problems. It won't help you on the street tracks. But if you go through your power battery zone thing, what's it called?
Attack mode.
Attack mode, yes. I knew that. Attack mode. Steve, in the edit, can we get that? Going through attack mode, suddenly you've got a car that you can accelerate a lot earlier with and will have more power down the straight. So you're going to have more power down the straight because you've got an extra sort of engine pulling the front wheels as well. I think the key thing is going to be the handling. So you get to the exit before you get to a corner. And now where normally you get on the power too early, the rear wheels with your steering wheel turned will want to overtake the front wheels because the front wheels aren't powered. They're effectively brakes until you overcome the friction to get them going. If they're powered, even with a smaller ratio of power, they're now dragging the front wheels forward in the direction you want to go. So go into your sim rig, which I'm sure everybody's got, and drive a front wheel drive car. If the rear's starting to go, you get on the power, you pin it, and you kind of drag yourself out of the slide. So if that is only available in attack mode, I think that could be fun. I think this is going to work.
So for clarity, in the race start and the quali duels is a very limited amount of power that you can have towards the front axle. So we have 350
it doesn't matter. If everyone's got it, it's not really a massive issue.
Sure, but it's 350 kilowatts of power you have, 50 kilowatts only for the front axle, unless you're in the attack mode in the race. Then you can have whatever you want. I think. There was a long document about it, and I'm not 100% sure that I've digested it fully yet. Yeah, but I think that's how it works.
And the big thing with it being such a big document is you just know this is also going to be an agent for chaos when it comes to penalties.
Oh, yeah.
There's going to be some point where somebody uses it and they're not supposed to, or they use too much power, or A, B, C, X, Y, Z. There's going to be some sort of chaotic penalties, which classic Formula E, that is part of its DNA. But also, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's a whole other thing for us to get used to as viewers, a whole other thing for teams and drivers to get used to. I'm very much looking forward to it.
So when I was watching it last season, the attack mode was almost like a pit stop or a reverse Joker lap. So it's like,
that's what I liken it to.
Mode. Yeah, and it was like a bad thing. Attack mode, it's written on the tin. Attack mode, not, oh no, I've got to get that out of the way mode. Now it's a real advantage.
The thing is, because attack mode wasn't, it was something you just got rid of, wasn't it? It was seen as like this inconvenience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Rather than something to like charge through, especially when we had the peloton style races where it was like, I don't want to use up my energy. I'm supposed to be saving it. Sadly, nothing's really been done about the peloton style of racing that we can see. So we will see if we still get that.
You said there was an idea that they abandoned.
There was an idea that they abandoned, the golden laps idea, which I'm kind of glad they did because it seemed like typical convoluted sticking plaster on a gaping wound issue where they were going to nominate golden laps. So a bit like how back in the day when attack mode first came in, they would nominate a random number of times, not random, but a certain number of times and how many minutes you got it for. Right, that used to only be like, hey, 10 minutes before the race, we're going to tell you what it is. And then they sort of standardized it. This was going to be a similar thing where they were going to say, hey, lap 12 and 29, if you're leading on those laps, you're going to get a bonus point. And
Great.
So the idea was it would, in theory, it would stop the peloton style racing.
The only thing wrong with that is that it doesn't go far enough. Like, okay, so I don't want to go all aggressive, but you are everything that's wrong with European motorsports fans. With that, that's not quite in the traditional vein. Line everything up in pace.
No issue with tradition. No, look, I don't care about tradition. It seems like it's like when we had the issue of safety cars, meaning that they had too much energy, and so it was like, well, we want to create enticing finishes. What if we subtract an amount of energy that we'll use an algorithm to work out how much energy they would have used, and we'll deduct that from their total every time a safety car comes out, and look what happened. It blew up in their faces.
Can I just yell at Chris for a little longer?
Go on.
So what Chris seems to be advocating for is hard tires, equal aero spec series, line up in order of pace from qualifying, and just watch a train go from beginning to end. Okay, every motorsport has their thing that makes it not that. And if it is that, people don't watch. All right, so there's a lot of series that are like that. There's some tin top series that I won't mention in Britain that are really hard to watch. I've tried watching them on free to air. You've got to do something to make the action interesting. And I don't think that stage racing is a terrible way to go about it. Instead of the golden lap and the golden point, go full stage racing, right? Go full stage racing, have 3 stages, and at the end of each stage, you give away points and then finally points away at the end. Because you know what? We've tried the alternate. We've tried doing nothing for 25 laps, having 3 laps of action interrupted by a safety car, and then coming home, a couple of laps later. Why not try something else that isn't that? Because anything is better than what we kind of see at Portland. Sorry, Portland.
I feel like if we just knocked 5 minutes off the race time, this would be a much easier solution, TBH. Actually, while you were banging on about that, point about the
Making point,
tire.
not banging on.
Yeah, you were banging on about that. So the all-wheel drive plus these softer tires. Now that we've engaged the front drive as well, the front tires are going to degrade quite a bit more, I think. So that's something to watch out for. The fact that the tires are going to wear more anyway because it's a softer compound, but now we're putting more energy through the front tires as well. So I think that's something to look out for potentially, especially on a double header weekend because those tires will be pretty gone by then.
And one of the drivers was also saying in Portland again that you're going to be pretty much getting very different results when it comes to the permanent versus the city tracks.
Oh yeah.
Because again, the speed demand is different. So with all-wheel drive, when you have those longer straights that you can go down or the big sweeping turns, you can make much better use of getting up to that top speed much faster. Whereas if you're on a street tight circuit where you're not hitting those top speeds anyway, it's nifty to have, but it's not making use of the power aspect in the same way.
Yeah, I think it's you're always going to see the difference, I think. And we are kind of slowly making that transition. I mean, obviously, there's rumors of like, Silverstone replacing London next year, but there always does seem to be a case for using the permanent facility, but doing Formula E's own thing. We saw it in Shanghai, we see it in Valencia, we see it in Mexico. All those tracks are back for this year as well. So yeah, we'll see what they do for the other ones. We do still actually have, just speaking of the calendar, we do still have a pretty gaping hole in the calendar actually of about 2 months.
Brutal. Well, in March we were supposed to have a race.
Yeah, there was, what was it? There was rumors about the Hyderabad replacement, which was going to be in Thailand. That didn't come out. So yeah, it's kind of a running joke with Formula E at this point that we're going to have at least one race that gets cancelled that leaves us with a massive gap. But the good news is that once we get into, sort of May, then the races come thick and fast, just like they did last year. But again, Formula E is not utilizing this off-season period where international motorsport is relatively quiet. Formula E can't make use of it because they can't find the races to fill the gaps.
Which is really unfortunate because you hit December and all of a sudden there's nothing to watch. And Formula E, like you said, they're not capitalizing on it. I also highly dislike how the start of the season is a single race.
Have they done that again?
Yeah, it's a
Sao Paulo
Formula
single
E,
header.
what?
Yeah, and then we go to Mexico and it's also a single header. Yeah.
No complaints about Mexico being a single header though, because that race is trash. The
there goes our invite to Mexico. Jeez.
The Sao Paulo one though should be a double header. I'm surprised they haven't done the same with Miami, because also when you look at it, out of how many events have we got? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 individual events.
Yes, 16 races, 10 weekends.
Yeah, and 7 of them are double headers. Why don't we just do all double headers?
I do wish that was the format at the end of the day, because again, for most people, if the track is local, that's fine. They go for a single day of racing that is really good niche. But when they're going to permanent tracks where these facilities are going to be used to hosting 2-3 day events, why not just do the 2 days? Then that would encourage more people probably to travel to these race weekends. Because I can tell you, the inclination to go over to Miami across the continent, 6 hours of a flight for a single day of racing.
Yeah.
And
it's very discouraging.
As well. Yeah.
It's not like it's at some street somewhere. It's at the Miami Speedway. It's a NASCAR venue. And, the Mexico one is at Hermanos Rodriguez. The only one you can make a partial claim for is the Sao Paulo one because it's held, in a park. And probably the locals don't like their park being shut, which is exactly what happened here in London.
Battersea.
For the, Battersea Park race. Anyway.
Oh, man. But London XL versus Battersea as a venue.
Oh, no contest. London XL is the best Formula E venue.
It was really great. Yeah.
Brilliant. Is this the part where I beat the broken drum of just saying, you know what, Vancouver has a very nice park, Vancouver has very nice streets, and I'm still bitter?
Hang on, there no comment from the Spanners corner. Sorry.
Uh, I just want a race where I don't have to travel.
In fact,
That's
the
all it
lawyers are
is.
saying just to shut it down. We're just going to have to shut it down here. I'll bolt the door. You carry on.
Oh, yes. But good old calendar. We always have things to say about it because at the end of the day, all we want is to regularly see racing and to see double headers. They should just do it exactly how we want. Or ask
Exactly.
AI, as everyone does these days. Just ask AI. It'll fix everything. It'll fix the format of the race. It'll fix the calendar. Bing, bang, boom. All our problems are solved.
When is the first European race? What round?
Oh, good
May?
question.
Yeah.
Monaco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Around 5, 3, 5,
Okay.
something like that.
Round 6 and 7,
Yeah,
3rd and
Yeah.
4th
but
of
it's
May.
the back half of the season before you come to Europe, where motorsport is from.
Yeah,
It's
but
a little insensitive.
Yeah, but the problem is, mate. So you do Monaco on the 3rd and 4th of May, then you go to Asia for Japan, China, and Indonesia, and then we come back
And
to
then
Europe
come
in
back.
July for Tempelhof and London.
Okay, Monaco's on my list. Have you been? Anyone been to the Monaco E-Prix?
I went in season 3 when I was a journalist.
Ah, well, what were the crowds like? Is tickets available? Because I can't afford the F1.
Yeah, you'll probably be able to get tickets. Yeah,
And the last Formula E races I've seen there looked really good.
yeah. It's brilliant. It works really well for Formula E.
Yeah, 3 wide in the hairpin.
Oh my god! All right,
Yeah.
all right, I'm in. Let's go, Chris.
Ah, well,
Oh.
I'm busy, but
Oh,
Oh, Chris is busy. He has things to do and places to be.
you'll
gonna
want to
pretend.
talk. You literally started the Zoom call by complaining about your schedule.
I had to go to Atlanta to drive race cars. My life's so terrible.
Oh,
I was up for 22 hours and then my hockey team lost spectacularly, okay?
No,
It's
that's
been
fair.
a
That's
rough
fair.
the
48
latter
hours.
you can complain about. Yes.
Yeah, the hockey thing I will incessantly complain about. And I did have a poll up asking if this was worse or if them losing game 7 of the playoffs on my birthday was worse. And I can't quite decide.
That was very Canadian, so we either need a translator or we need to
She was very
Go back.
close to slipping into French then, so we should
Yeah.
be lucky that it stayed in English.
Oh, you are very lucky about that. I about went full Canuck on y'all. Oh, and speaking of, well, actually, not really speaking of, but we do need a transition here because we're
Great
going to start
segue.
talking. We're going to start talking about team changes. We have 2 different liveries names on the grid this time here. Lola Racing, which looks like the IKEA car. Okay.
Mr. Preston, Mark Preston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Friend
then
of the show, Mark
Kiro
Preston.
Racing. And they have the bright yellowish green, I want to say, on their car. I don't
Yeah.
quite know how to describe that shade of coloring.
It's very nice. I do
Mhm.
like it. Striking car. Shame it'll be at the back, but it's gonna look good regardless. Now, some of you may judge my cynicism, but it is what we're talking about with Kiro here. Investment from the Forest Road Company, which apparently was put together by Dan Ticktum. So his seat is pretty secured. We're waiting to hear on news on the second driver, but they will be running a year-old Porsche powertrain. And so, yes, Porsche, won the Drivers' Championship with that car last year, but merely by it being a year old, it is they might well have some speed in qualifying every once in a while. But by the way, there's not a shooting going on in the background. It's Diwali at the moment, so
Oh,
the locals are celebrating. If you can hear fireworks in the background, I
well,
apologize.
happy. that.
Yeah, happy Diwali. What was I talking about? Kiro, yes. So they might well show some speed in qualifying every once in a while, but the fact that it's a year-old powertrain in that car does just mean they're going to lack efficiency in the races. So they do have quite an uphill task ahead of them.
You're wrong to criticize that, though, because that is the spirit in which I would like motorsports to be in. You should be able to get your foot in the door, learn, show what you can do, give drivers a spot. Yeah, you might have to, get a bobsleigh that's just metal and then paint the flag on it afterwards.
Don't get me wrong. I'm very happy to have them on the grid. I'd rather have them on the grid than not have them there at all. But, this is Kiro. We're talking, Kiro that was formerly the ERT that was formerly Neo, that was formerly Next TV, that was formerly Team China Racing, that won the Drivers' Championship the first year with Nelson Piquet. So this is not a new team we're talking about trying to get its foot in the door. This is a very well-established team that has consistently finished at the back of the grid year on year on year on year. And so I don't want to be pessimistic about it. I'm just saying, don't expect to see this beautiful car up at the front of the field in Sao Paulo.
All right. But we can be optimistic about Lola, can't we?
100%. So the team that was Apt Cupra last year, so the Lola name coming back with a technical partnership with Yamaha being operated by the Apt team, still got Lucas Di Grassi on board, cracking young superstar in the form of Zane Maloney as well, one of the latest young guns to come into Formula E from junior single-seater racing. So he's currently in F2, and Sauber Junior, naturally I think that's going to come to an end. Yeah, that is a perfect mix of like youth and the old guard. Lucas Di Grassi, like the most experienced Formula E driver out there, probably the perfect teammate for Zane Maloney to have in his rookie year. I'm quietly what's the word I'm looking for? Quietly like excited to see how they get on.
Is he the first Barbadian racing driver in Formula E?
Oh, 100%, yeah. But the boy from Barbados, I mean, yeah, there's not many. I think he's the first Barbadian driver in Formula 2 and pretty much every series he's been in since coming to Europe.
And is Mark Preston still statistically the most successful Formula E boss ever?
Oh, now you're really going to test my knowledge on that one because, I'd have to double check the numbers because Jean-Paul Driot obviously won many, many titles in the Renault Edams days, but I do wonder if Techeetah did end up outscoring them. I think they did. So,
well, when I was having a chat with Mark, I did call him that, and he didn't argue with me. So
who would argue with that, though?
No,
well, I don't. There's nobody that comes to my mind that would have more in Formula E specifically. So yeah,
right,
let's go ahead and say that is true.
Betting the farm on Lola then. In fact, like I'm not being like disingenuous. That's my team that I'm supporting for the season.
Yeah, fair.
They're the driver pairing that I'm most excited by, especially since we're seeing a lot of new ones that are, as we do most years in Formula E, they like to shuffle things around. It's a lovely game of musical chairs, but they are the pairing I'm most excited for. They have a rookie, they have, as we said, the senior driver that just lifetime of knowledge. The only other rookie driver we have, I believe, is Taylor Barnard, and he's rookie-esque because he has been with McLaren, who he's going to be full-time with now, but he was their rookie driver. He had that short stint when Sam Bird hurt his hand last year, did a very, very solid job, and so now we're just seeing him naturally progress into that new seat. But we have two rookies this year, assuming that Kiro doesn't go with a rookie for their second one.
In that battle, I am cheering on Zane Maloney because Lucas Di Grassi used to follow me on Twitter, but then unfollowed me. So,
oh wow! But Lucas was our first interview.
Oh no! All right, yeah, that probably supersedes that as well. So, yeah. I'll do a supercut of Chris's interviews, and I'll re-release that on the feed.
I have all the time in the world for Lucas Di Grassi, so I always wish him well. And Taylor Barnard, that is another exciting young talent to come up and to be alongside someone like Sam Bird. So it's a shame Jake Hughes ended up losing out, but he found himself a seat at Maserati. It's all new lineup for Maserati this year. In fact, with Stoffel Van Dorn making the switch over from DS Penske, and in fact they've ended up doing a direct swap with Max Gunther. So a complete swap between the two Stellantis branded cars. And DS Penske maybe is not going to be DS Penske for too much longer because there's a bit of friction between the two, and DS might not continue with Formula E. Obviously, there's a lot of question marks around that, and a lot of questions to be answered over the course of the next couple of years. But still, with John Eric Byrne, of course, is sort of their headline driver at the moment. So yeah, there's quite a bit to play out there as well.
We have lots of good stuff. And then we only have a couple of teams that have completely unchanged lineups. So that would be Porsche. They haven't changed anything. And then I always want to call them Evolution, but they're not Evolution.
Envision.
Envision. Thank you.
Envision and Jaguar.
And Jaguar, yeah.
So both
big three?
both Jaguar powered teams go with continuity, but the Porsche customer team, Andretti, they have replaced Norman Nato with Nico Muller. And so it's kind of third time's the charm, maybe, with Andretti, because they haven't quite been able to give Jake Dennis a teammate that can back him up on a regular basis.
That feels like an upgrade instinctively.
Nico Muller, 100%. So Nico Muller, when we were talking to Lucas de Grassi, he said Nico Muller was the best teammate he ever had. And I genuinely think Muller is going to be an absolute demon in a Porsche-powered car run by Andretti. Jake Dennis is going to have his hands full with that for sure. And then the other movement, obviously, so Norman Nato has found a home back at Nissan alongside Ollie Rowland. And with Nissan, like, they could have fought for the driver's title last year with Ollie Rowland, which is, it highlights, sadly, the job that Sash Fenestras was doing, because he was nowhere near Rowland's pace, really, during the season. So that's why he's ended up having being shown the door. So without the disqualification in Misano and Rowland missing a couple of races due to illness, 100% Rowland could have been in that championship fight. The only thing that sort of slightly concerns me with Nissan is that they've got two drivers that they previously let go at the moment, because obviously Norman was driving for the team 2 years ago before they binned him off for Fenestras. And then Rowland was let go a couple of years ago as well.
With their exits. Don't ever do that, kids. It broke up for a reason.
It is slightly awkward, and I do feel like Nissan bringing Norman back, because we know he wasn't doing a spectacular job in the Andretti. It does feel like they've just sort of scooped up whoever they could find.
It'll be different this time.
Maybe it will be. One thing I will say, Ollie will 100% be in the title fight, driving there. I wanted to mention this just because I think it's a bit funny. The Nissan E4 Ors 05.
That sounds powerful.
No, it's E4 Ors.
Oh no!
Because it's a 4 and ORCE.
Oh, come on.
Oh, E-Force.
It's supposed to be E-Force, but it's a 4 and ORCE.
Yeah.
So it's E4 Ors.
Yeah, that's like someone from London saying that there are 4 horses.
4 horses, yeah. It's a Nissan 4 horse. That's what it is.
4 horsepower.
Okay. So we've all collectively, it seems, decided that the driver pairing we're most excited for is Lola. But now we do have to make the slight, teeny tiny prediction of who do we think is going to be the most successful driver pairing. One of the new ones? One of the old ones? Pass?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. Because obviously Evans and Cassidy would be your immediate thought, but they did sort of not help each other too much last year. Probably Verline and DaCosta, I want to say, actually, because DaCosta saved his seat last year with his sudden mid-season turnaround, and ended up fighting for the title, which was miraculous given where he'd been for the first year and a half of the Porsche program. So I would argue Verline DaCosta might be a basic answer, considering, Verline is the reigning drivers' champion. I don't think Gunther and Vern, though, are a million miles away from that, though, at DS Penske. That is a very formidable lineup as well.
I think I'm going to go with Andretti for my prediction.
Yeah.
I think driver pairing wise, they're going to be quite strong. The car itself is a completely different thing, but driver pairing wise, I think that they'll perform well together.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, because so far over the last couple of years we have had the Porsche and the Jaguar battles, and I think this is the first time that all 4 of those teams, the 2 works teams and their 2 customer teams, have got 2 fantastic drivers. Like all out, that will be the top 8 in probably most events. I think you'll find them there, mixed in with a bit of Rowland, and then the DS Penske team as well. That's very, very strong in there as well. It reminds you the fact that someone's got to finish like 17th. haven't they? And it will be somebody who like won 2 races ago. So it's going to be really, really interesting season, I think, seeing that lot unfold.
Difficult to predict. A whole bunch of new elements coming into play, from the car to the drivers, new teams. We're looking at a pretty good season coming up. But before we get to the start of the new season, we have testing. We will see how that turns out. And as long as everything goes according to plan, we're also going to be having a women's test. So we're going to be seeing 2 drivers for 8 teams, one for 3 of them. And it's a lot of familiar names for anybody if they've watched motorsports or if they keep up with F1 Academy specifically. There's a whole bunch of names that have participated in the last 2 years on that list, as well as the likes of Jamie Chadwick, Alice Powell. So a lot of really fun talent coming to participate. And they are getting to drive the current car, which I think is almost the more exciting part of all of it, is they're not being given something that is a little bit outdated. They're getting to race this thing.
They're not being given a pretend controller, whilst the bigger kids are really playing on the ones that are connected.
Exactly.
It's not the first time they've done something like that. I remember in season 5, I think it was, after the Diriyah race, there was a test where they said if you ran a woman in the car, you were allowed to have an extra car of testing. So you could have one of your regular drivers in if you ran a woman in the second car. But this is the first time we've seen an all-woman lineup in a Formula E test, or any kind of test, I would say, outside of Formula One Academy. So yeah, really exciting, and I hope that the teams end up utilizing their drivers, throughout.
Well, it's such a relevant comparison, isn't it? So if you look at the drivers that are in there, this is a sign of the tide. So legitimately 10 years ago, you'd have had people going, well, I don't think you could have women in top flight motorsport. There was still people just making that argument that there was somehow this limit that would persist. And that is being eroded now at a stark pace. It's still going to take a long time to actually bubble up and boil to the surface, but we're so much closer and the pace is increasing. And now what you've got is a lineup of professional drivers who've been racing in top series around the world, now into like a top tier FIA. This is the top of the pyramid in electric racing, and they're going to be driving the same cars, and the engineers are going to be able to see the data. And I don't think there is any argument about, can women race in top motorsport? The argument's gone. It's now more about, is there an individual that is worth giving a shot?
And what's really great, I think, about the lineup that we have in this case is it's also such a mix of women that are at the early stages of their career, where if you see, okay, they have a solid race time, we can develop them. You have McLaren, they have Bustamante and Ella Lloyd. And Ella Lloyd, she is very young, and they just signed her this year. She's going to be in her first year of F1 Academy next year. So you're seeing people who have time to develop. So it's, yes, you're getting this great opportunity. Yes, you could potentially prove that you're ready for Formula E, but you could also prove that you just have the capability of learning. And that's the incredible thing is, yes, it's one test session, but you get to see that progression from start to finish. And with some of these teams where they have opportunities in other series, McLaren, Andretti, Penske, you're looking at somewhere where they could also go, okay, this is a great starting point. Where else do we put you? Where else do we develop you? And that's incredibly exciting to me.
You know what's funny? It's actually the first season of Formula E that had the highest participation of women. We had like 3 in 1 year. And I don't think there are many series that can boast that, to say that, hang on, how many cars did we have back then? 20, 22 cars. So, 10% of the grid, let's say, was women. Not many series that can say that.
Absolutely solid start for sure. And definitely would be great to see 3 or more women in Formula E soon.
Do you know what I need to do? I need to go back now. I'm going to go back on the Wikipedia page back to the first season and see who those 3 women were.
Surprised me with that. I was like, really?
Yeah, no, for real. Maybe it was only 2. But we did have This is that's season 2. Excuse me. Hang on. First season. We had scrolling down Michaela Caruti in the Trulli car. Remember them? Remember when Jarno Trulli had a team? Who else was there? Simona Di Silvestro and Catherine Legg.
Wow.
There we go.
I watched those seasons. Strike me down with a feather.
Yeah. And I was at Catherine. Catherine's still racing. She's doing Indy next year, I think, again.
And she regularly runs the very pretty, very iconic elf liveried car. It is pink. It has a little lipstick on it, and I love it.
I think might be doing IMSA again, maybe. She was doing it the year before last.
No, she's still active. She's still out there representing. It'll be great to watch that women's test. It'll be great to watch preseason testing as a whole, and for us to get back started up with Formula E Season 11. We have a lot to look forward to, and you better join us for race reviews, for driver interviews, for deep dives into whatever we find interesting. Maybe we'll get around to creating a database for ourselves so we don't have to continuously look back to Wikipedia and find fun facts and stories to tell you about the history.
I like it when Chris is sat there Googling things, just hearing him typing away, panicking that he can't find stuff.
A core part of the Formula E podcast, waiting for Chris to look it up. It is fantastic. But yes, thank you to Chris Stevens for joining. Thank you to Spanners for being here. I'm still Cristina Lee Mace. You can find us all at the links that'll be provided, where you can also pick up the aforementioned hoodie. Thank you for joining us today. Join us for the rest of the season, and we will have a great Formula E time.
Makes it sound like I got a participation award at the end there. Thanks.
We don't do that.
For all his insights and Spanners. You're like,
you were here too.